episode titled The Strange Room. It was a normal morning. Everything in the Pig family house was calm. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast in the kitchen. Daddy Pig was sitting at the table reading a newspaper. George was playing on the floor with his dinosaur. Peppa came downstairs and said hello. Everything looked the same as always. After breakfast, Peppa went to play. She walked down the hallway and stopped. Something about the wall looked different. She touched it. In one place, she felt a small handle. Peppa paused. She did not remember a door being there. She pulled the handle. The wall slowly opened. Behind it was a narrow passage. Peppa walked inside. It was quiet and dark. She walked forward until she saw light. At the end, there was a room. Peppa entered. She froze. The room looked exactly like their kitchen. Mummy Pig was standing by the stove. Daddy Pig was sitting at the table. George was playing on the floor. Everything was the same. But something was wrong. Their eyes were round and dark. They did not blink. They were looking directly at Peppa. Mummy Pig smiled. "Peppa, come here," she said. The voice sounded flat. Daddy Pig smiled too. Peppa did not move closer. She stepped back. George lifted his head. He said, "Dinosaur." But his voice was slower and quieter. Peppa turned and ran out of the room. She closed the door. She returned to the hallway. Everything looked normal again. Peppa said nothing. In the evening, she walked past the wall again. The door was closed. But now there was a quiet sound behind it, like whispering. Peppa did not open it. At night, Peppa woke up. The house was silent. She heard a voice. It sounded like Mummy Pig. "Peppa, come here." Peppa did not move. The voice was closer. It was behind the wall. Then she heard a soft knocking. Peppa closed her eyes. In the morning, everything looked normal. Peppa came downstairs. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. George was playing. Peppa sat at the table. She looked at their faces. Everything seemed normal. Then she looked at the wall. There was a small handle. It was slowly moving. The episode was called The Attic Window. Today is a sunny day. Peppa Pig and Rebecca Rabbit are playing hide and seek. Daddy Pig is reading his newspaper, and Mummy Pig is baking a delicious apple pie. The house is very cozy and smells of apples. "Count to 10, Rebecca!" Peppa shouted and ran upstairs. Peppa decided to hide at the very top of the house, in the attic. She climbed the narrow stairs. There were many old things in the attic, boxes, old toys, and even Daddy Pig's old bicycle. At the very end of the attic, Peppa saw a small round window that she hadn't noticed before. What a strange window," Peppa whispered. She came closer. The window was very clean and shiny, but when Peppa looked into it, she was surprised. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, but in the window, everything looked different. There was a thick black forest, and the sky was dark blue, almost night. White fog flew between the trees, looking like cotton candy. "It's a very unusual window," Peppa said. She put her hoof to the glass. The glass was cold, and immediately frost patterns appeared on it, even though the house was warm. Peppa watched blue rabbits jumping in that strange forest. They looked like fireflies. Maybe it's a window to a fairy tale, Peppa thought. She saw Rebecca, who had come up to the attic. But Rebecca looked towards the boxes and didn't see the window. "I found you, Peppa!" Rebecca shouted happily. "Look what I found!" Peppa pointed to the window. Rebecca came over and looked. She saw the usual green hill and the sun. "It's just a window, Peppa," Rebecca said. "Let's go eat pie." Peppa looked into the window once more. It was showing their usual green hill again. But Peppa knew she had seen white fog and blue rabbits. "I just wanted to show you a fairy tale," Peppa smiled. In the evening, when Peppa and George were already in their beds, Peppa looked at the stars through her bedroom window. She knew there was a window in the attic that saw what others didn't. She was warm and calm. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. The episode was called The Longest Bus. It begins on a normal morning. Peppa gets ready for school, puts on her backpack, and walks to the bus stop, where Susie, Pedro, Rebecca, and the other children are already waiting. They talk while waiting for the school bus. Soon, a bus appears around the corner, but it looks very different from usual. It is very long. First, the front of the bus appears, then another section, and then another one. Pedro says in surprise, "That's the longest bus I've ever seen." The bus stops and the doors open. As always, Miss Rabbit is the driver. "Good morning, children," she says. "Good morning, Miss Rabbit," the children reply. Peppa steps inside and immediately notices that the bus is much bigger on the inside than it looks from the outside. The first part looks like a normal school bus, but when the children walk farther, they see another door. Peppa opens it and finds another room. Inside, there are soft seats and small tables. "Wow," says Peppa, "you can play here." The children continue walking through the bus. The next door leads to a small room with shelves full of books. "It's a library," says Rebecca. The shelves are filled with books about animals, dinosaurs, and adventures. George picks up a dinosaur book and sits down to look at it. But the bus keeps going farther. The children open another door and discover a playroom with a soft carpet and a box of toys. Susie says it's the best bus ever. Peppa walks along the hallway and looks ahead. It almost seems like the bus never ends. "I wonder how long this bus really is," she says. Meanwhile, Miss Rabbit calmly drives the bus down the road. After some time, the bus begins to slow down. "We're at school," Miss Rabbit says. The children step outside and look at the bus again. From the outside, it now looks like just a long bus, but not nearly as huge as it seemed inside. Peppa smiles and says, "That was the most interesting bus ride ever." Susie nods and says, "And the longest." Pedro adds, "I wish we could ride a bus like that every day." Miss Rabbit smiles and says, "Sometimes the road to school can be a little adventure." The children walk toward the school building while still talking about the amazing bus, and Peppa turns around one more time to look at it before going inside. The episode was called The Endless Cellar. Today is a sunny day, and Peppa Pig and George have come to visit Grandpa and Grandma Pig. Grandpa Pig is working in his garden, and Grandma Pig is baking a delicious chocolate cake. The house is very fun and smells of chocolate. "Grandpa, can we help you?" Peppa asked. "Of course, Peppa," Grandpa Pig smiled. "I need to bring some empty jars from the cellar." Grandpa Pig opened the heavy door in the floor. Peppa and George carefully descended the ladder. In the cellar, it was cool and smelled of earth. Usually, there were only jars of jam and vegetables here, but today, the cellar looked different. "Wow! It's so long!" Peppa was surprised. Instead of a small room, the cellar had turned into an endless corridor with high shelves. The shelves went far, far away, and there were many things on them. Here, there was not only jam, but also old toys, books, and even bicycles. "Look, George, that's my old ball!" Peppa shouted. She found her little blue ball that she had lost last year. The ball was clean and not dusty at all, as if it were just waiting for her here. George also found his old car. "Beep, beep," George said happily. He started rolling the car on the shelf. They went further and further along the endless cellar. On the shelves, Peppa even saw her Daddy Pig's toys from when he was little. Everything that had ever been lost in their family was here. "This is a very unusual place," Peppa said. She took an old music box from the shelf. When Peppa opened the box, a quiet and very beautiful music sounded. Grandpa Pig's voice came from above. "Peppa! George! Did you find the jars?" Peppa and George quickly took 2 empty glass jars and went back. When they went up to the garden, Grandpa Pig was still digging the garden bed. "Grandpa, your cellar has become endless!" Peppa shouted. Grandpa Pig laughed. My cellar always stores everything that is important to us, Peppa. Sometimes it just shows us more than usual. They spent a wonderful day in the garden. In the cellar, it became quiet and normal again. But Peppa knew that somewhere down there, deep underground, her old toys were still lying and the music from the box was playing. In the evening, when Peppa and George went to bed, Peppa smiled. She knew that nothing in the world disappears without a trace. She closed her eyes and fell asleep with a peaceful heart. The episode was called The Door That Appears at Night. It was a normal morning. Peppa woke up and went downstairs. In the kitchen, Mummy Pig was making breakfast, Daddy Pig was reading his newspaper, and George was playing with his dinosaur. Everything was calm and usual. After breakfast, Peppa and George went upstairs to play in their room. They were walking down the hallway when Peppa suddenly noticed a door that had not been there before. It was between the bathroom and their parents' bedroom. The door looked completely normal, white with a round handle, but Peppa could not remember seeing it before. She stopped and looked at it. "George, have we seen this door before?" Peppa asked. George looked at it and shook his head. Peppa carefully opened the door. Inside, there was a room. It was almost empty. There was a small table and a box of toys. Peppa walked closer and opened the box. Inside, there were toys. There was a doll, a ball, and a green dinosaur exactly like George's. Peppa looked at George. George was holding his dinosaur in his hands. Peppa picked up the second dinosaur. It felt cold and a little heavier than usual. She put it back. They left the room and closed the door. Peppa decided to tell their parents. Downstairs, she said that they had found a new room. Mummy Pig smiled and said there was no new room in the house. Daddy Pig went upstairs to check. Peppa and George followed him. They reached the place, but there was just a normal wall with wallpaper. There was no door. Peppa stayed quiet. She did not argue. In the evening, she was playing in her room. Among her toys, there was the dinosaur she had seen in that room. She did not remember bringing it. That night, Peppa woke up. The house was quiet. She walked into the hallway and looked at the place where the wall had been. The door was there again. It was slightly open. There was no sound coming from inside. Peppa stood and looked at it. It felt like someone was inside. She did not go in. She slowly closed the door and went back to her room. In the morning, everything looked normal again. But now, Peppa knew that the door appeared only when no one was expecting it. Episode titled The Time Loop. It was a normal morning. Everything in the Pig family house was calm. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast in the kitchen. Daddy Pig was sitting at the table reading a newspaper. George was playing on the floor with his dinosaur. Peppa came downstairs and said hello. Everything looked the same as always. She sat at the table. Mummy Pig said, "Peppa, breakfast is ready." Peppa smiled. She started eating. Everything went as usual. After breakfast, Peppa went outside. She played, ran, and laughed. The day passed calmly. In the evening, she went to sleep. The night was quiet. In the morning, Peppa opened her eyes. She went downstairs. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. George was playing. Mummy Pig said, "Peppa, breakfast is ready." Peppa stopped. Everything was exactly the same. She said nothing. She sat down again. Everything repeated. Peppa went outside. She tried to do something different. She walked in another direction, but she still ended up on the same road. In the evening, she went to sleep. In the morning, everything started again. Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. George was playing. Peppa looked at them. She already knew what would happen. The day repeated again and again. Peppa started noticing details. Sometimes George said dinosaur at the same moment. Sometimes Daddy Pig turned the page at the same time. Peppa tried to change the day. She did not go outside. She hid. But in the evening, she still fell asleep. In the morning, everything started again. One time, she did not go downstairs. She stayed in her room. She sat quietly. She waited. Then she heard a voice. "Peppa, breakfast is ready." The voice was closer. Peppa did not answer. Then the door slowly opened. Mummy Pig stood there, but she did not move. She just looked. Then she said, "You have to live this day." Peppa closed her eyes. In the morning, everything looked normal. She went downstairs. Everything was the same. But now, Peppa noticed one thing. The clock on the wall was not moving.